The sound of bodies thudding against tile echoed down the deserted hallway like a warning. Elise Tin crouched low, her breath steady, her eyes locked on the last standing figure in a circle of writhing teenage boys. Her school skirt was dusty, her white sneakers scuffed, and a quiet fury burned in her chest. "You wanted a show," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "Hope you enjoyed the finale." But this moment, where the bullied became the storm, was still 30 minutes away. Right now, Elise was just the quiet new girl in a small-town Texas high school, kneeling in the center of the drama room, surrounded by four seniors in Letterman jackets who thought cruelty was entertainment. "Lower," said Dylan Reed, team captain and self-appointed king of Oak Valley High. His voice was loud, mocking, echoing in the dim space where the drama teacher had conveniently disappeared. "I said bark. Dogs don't get to talk back." Laughter erupted from the others. Zach, who held his phone up with the camera rolling, Marco, chewing gum with dead eyes, and Trevor, who locked the door behind them 10 minutes ago. Elise's fists clenched at her sides, but she didn't move, not yet. Her father had always taught her patience in combat. Don't strike first. Let them overcommit. Let them think they've won. And they did. Ever since she transferred from LA 3 weeks ago, she'd been their favorite target, mocked for her accent, her quietness, her Korean-American background, and her refusal to play the social games that ruled this school. But they weren't just bullies. They were calculating. It started with verbal taunts in the lunchroom, moved to stolen notebooks, then escalated to whispered rumors and locker vandalism. When they realized she wouldn't fight back, they got bolder. Today was supposed to be her final humiliation. Make her crawl and bark like an animal, film it, and send it around school. But they made one mistake. They thought she was defenseless. Elise had spent every Saturday for the past 6 years training in Hapkido with her mother, a former military hand-to-hand instructor. She'd promised not to fight unless it was the only option left. But now, her father's pendant, a small jade stone stolen from her locker, was dangling from Dylan's hand like a trophy. "Come get it, mutt," he sneered. That was the last word he said before Elise moved. But before we get there, you need to understand how this quiet girl became the storm no one saw coming. And why some kicks don't just break bones, they shatter legacies. 3 weeks earlier, Elise Tin stepped through the gates of Oak Valley High with her head down and her hopes even lower. The August heat pressed down like judgment, and the chatter of unfamiliar voices felt like a foreign language. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had plans: senior year at her school in Los Angeles, prom with her dance team friends, weekend ramen runs with her grandmother. But after her dad's sudden heart attack and the move across the country to live with her aunt in rural Texas, everything familiar vanished. Oak Valley was smaller, tighter, and colder in ways that had nothing to do with the weather. Her mother had taken on double shifts at the base clinic to keep them afloat. Elise, in turn, had promised not to cause trouble. "Lay low," her mom had said during the drive. "Finish school. Then we start fresh. You're stronger than you think." Elise had nodded. But strong didn't matter here. Not when Dylan Reed and his crew ruled the school like a frat house with no adults in sight. At first, it was just teasing, mocking the way she wrote notes in both English and Korean, calling her Silent Soul, turning her name into a punchline. But what really made her a target was when she politely turned Dylan down. He'd swaggered up to her locker one morning, grinning like he already owned the outcome. "You should come watch practice," he said. "Cheer from the stands. New girls get extra points if they know how to bark." Elise didn't laugh. She didn't even frown. She just closed her locker and walked away. That moment sealed it. By lunch, the jokes had evolved into hallway whispers. "She thinks she's better than us. Uppity transfer. Probably knows kung fu or some crap." Elise never corrected them. Let them guess. But what started as passive aggression turned into something more insidious. Her gym bag was slashed. Her presentation notes for AP Lit were deleted from the shared drive. Her mother's pendant, one of the last things her father gave her before deployment, went missing. Each time, the staff shrugged. "No witnesses. No proof. Kids will be kids," one teacher muttered. Elise swallowed her anger, told herself she could make it through one school year. But when she found the jade pendant dangling from Dylan's keychain during third-period theater class, something shifted. The same afternoon, she received a note shoved into her locker. "Come to the drama room after school. Come alone. Or the whole school sees what we filmed yesterday. Elise didn't know what they'd filmed, but she knew enough. Her mother had once told her, there's a difference between staying silent and being silenced. Elise was done being the latter. The drama room would be their stage, but the ending wouldn't go the way they expected. Elise entered the drama room that afternoon knowing it was a trap, but not caring. The heavy velvet curtains, dim overhead lighting, and creaky floorboards created a makeshift arena of shadows and secrets. Dylan and his gang were already waiting, lounging like predators in a den they believed was theirs. Zach was perched on the edge of the teacher's desk, phone in hand. Marco leaned against the wall near the door, blocking the exit. Trevor sat on the prop trunk, arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. Dylan stood at center stage, casually flipping her father's jade pendant between his fingers like it was nothing more than a cheap keychain. "Glad you could join us, Soul," he said, mocking her nickname. Or should I say, Spot? Yeah, that fits better. Laughter rippled through the group. Elise said nothing. Her heartbeat was steady, the way it always was right before a match. But this wasn't a tournament mat with referees and medals. This was real, and she was alone. "You know the rules," Zach said, raising his phone. "One crawl, one bark, and maybe, just maybe, we delete yesterday's video." "And if not?" Marco asked, theatrically cracking his knuckles. "Well, then you get famous. Viral famous." Elise slowly walked forward, her sneakers silent on the old linoleum. "What's in the video?" she asked quietly. "You," Dylan smirked, walking out of the locker room, crying. "Oh, and a nice upskirt clip," Marco grabbed. Her stomach turned, but her face didn't flinch. "You filmed that." "We film everything," Zach said proudly. "Helps keep stories straight." Elise looked at each of them. These weren't just bullies. They were predators who saw humiliation as a sport. And they built their power by counting on no one fighting back. "On your knees," Dylan said. "Right here. Bark for your daddy's necklace." Zach's camera clicked on. Marco stepped forward, ready to shove her down if she hesitated. Trevor laughed behind her, blocking her retreat. Elise breathed in deeply. Once, twice, like her mom had taught her. She looked at the jade pendant again, glinting under the flickering overhead light. That was the last piece of her father she had, and they thought they could dangle it like bait. "Fine," she said, and to their surprise, she knelt. "That's more like it," Dylan said. "Now bark." But what came next wasn't a bark. It was a movement, subtle, controlled, and terrifyingly fast. Elise's weight shifted, her hips turned, and before Dylan could blink, her legs swept out in a low arc. Marco's feet left the ground first. Then Trevor. And the fall began, not just physical, but symbolic. They thought they'd won. They were about to learn what a real fight looked like. It hadn't always been like this. Elise hadn't always been the girl who knelt in silence, plotting every angle. In LA, she'd been confident, part of a tight group of friends who trained together every week at her mom's martial arts center. Saturdays were for sparring, Sundays were for healing. But after her dad's sudden death, that version of her cracked, slowly, then all at once. The move to Texas was meant to give her mom a fresh start, a support system, and Elise a quiet senior year. Instead, it had been 3 weeks of calculated cruelty. It started small. Dylan knocking her books from her hands in the hallway, accidentally. Zach calling her mute girl in front of the entire history class. A water balloon full of orange soda tossed onto her during lunch. The teachers rarely intervened. Coach Jefferson, who oversaw the school's football team, just shrugged when she reported Zach filming her in gym class. "Boys'll be boys," he said with a dismissive chuckle. Elise learned quickly that at Oak Valley, silence protected the powerful. But even more than the harassment, it was the hypocrisy that stung. Posters lined the school's front office, "Zero tolerance for bullying. Every student matters." But when she'd gone to the assistant principal about her locker being vandalized with slurs, she was met with a tired sigh. "No proof. Maybe try making friends." Elise didn't cry, not even when she found her father's pendant missing. She simply sat outside the gym that night, her hands wrapped around her knees, staring into the dusk. She thought of quitting, thought of running. But then her mom came to pick her up, tired from a 12-hour shift, still smiling. "Long day?" she asked gently. Elise nodded. "Want to talk about it?" Elise shook her head. "Okay," her mom said, reaching across the car to squeeze her hand. "But just remember, even when the world pushes you down, You never have to stay there. You've got warrior blood in your bones. Elise held on to those words through the next week, even as the bullying worsened. When someone edited her face onto an inappropriate meme and sent it to the school group chat. When Dylan shoved her into a locker and laughed while she slid down to the floor. When she found a note inside her pencil case that read, "We own you now." And still, she didn't break. Not until she saw the pendant. Her father's pendant. On Dylan's keychain, clipped like some kind of trophy. That was the line. That was the moment something inside Elise stopped trying to be small. She wasn't here to survive them anymore. She was here to end this. The final straw came not with a shove or a slur, but with a whisper Elise overheard outside the science lab. "You think she's still got fight left?" Zach muttered to Marco. "After Friday, she'll be barking like a mutt and begging us to delete it." Elise had been walking past, unseen, just in time to hear Marco reply. "If she cries, we'll post that too. Either way, she loses." She stopped mid-step, heart still, not from fear, but clarity. This wasn't about a prank. This was calculated humiliation. These boys didn't want her to disappear quietly. They wanted her broken, controlled, turned into something laughable. And that meant this wasn't just her fight anymore. It was about every other student they'd steamrolled. Because it was common knowledge at Oak Valley that Dylan's crew had made a sport out of emotional warfare. Last year, a freshman named Devin switched schools after a video of him falling in gym mysteriously leaked. Another girl, Sarah, left the cheer team after her photos were posted without her permission. The administration had always looked the other way. Dylan's father donated to the school's new stadium, and Zach's mom was head of the parent board. That privilege had shielded them. Until now. Elise didn't go home that night after the note. She texted her aunt and told her she was staying late for a group project. Instead, she went to the one place she hadn't returned to since arriving in Texas, her mother's gym, tucked behind an old grocery store near the edge of town. "Elise," her mother blinked in surprise when she walked in. "What are you?" "I need to train," Elise said, the words crisp. "Not for a belt. Not for a test. For real." Her mother studied her for a long moment, then simply nodded. "Let's work." For the next 2 hours, Elise drilled. Side kicks, sweeps, ground escapes, wrist locks, not with hesitation, but with focus she hadn't felt since before LA fell apart. Her mother said nothing about the bruises Elise hadn't explained. She didn't ask about the hurt beneath the silence. She simply held the pads and called out combinations like old times. By the end, Elise's shirt clung to her in sweat-soaked folds, her knuckles red but her breathing calm. Her mother wiped her brow and said, "I don't know what's coming. But remember, power is knowing you can hurt someone and choosing not to." Elise nodded. She would remember. But she also knew something else. Sometimes restraint wasn't mercy. Sometimes it was a warning. And if Dylan and his friends didn't back down, she'd make sure they remembered it. By the time the school bell rang the next day, Elise knew exactly what she had to do. The note had said, "Come alone," and she would. But she'd also be ready. Her phone was already recording when she tucked it into the waistband of her leggings under her sweater, camera lens angled just enough to capture audio and video. She walked through the halls like it was any other day, but her eyes scanned everything, cataloging exits, fire alarms, blind spots. The drama room, she realized, was a perfect trap, isolated, windowless, and conveniently forgotten during after-school hours. No security cameras, no curious eyes, just 4 boys and a girl they believed was powerless. As the last bell echoed through the building, Elise gathered her things and headed there, pausing only once at her locker to retrieve a small cloth pouch, her father's hand wraps. She hadn't used them since he passed, but today felt right. She entered the room at exactly 3:15. The lights were dimmed. Dylan leaned against a stack of props, twirling her father's jade pendant between his fingers. Right on time, he smirked. Zach had his phone out again. "You ready to make your debut?" Elise didn't answer. She just looked at the pendant. Marco kicked a chair toward her. "Seat's right there, Soul. Or would you rather kneel?" Trevor chuckled. "I say we make her crawl first." Zach nodded, already adjusting the framing on his phone. "Yeah, start with the crawl. Then we can talk about deleting the footage." Dylan pointed to the floor. "Get down." Elise slowly set her bag down, her face unreadable. Then, without hesitation, she dropped to one knee. The boys hollered, jeering. "There we go," Marco said, "just like a real dog." Dylan stepped forward, dangling the pendant. Bark for Daddy's necklace. Elise looked up at him. Her eyes didn't show fear, only calculation. Okay, she said quietly. Then she shifted. Her knee turned inward, weight anchored through her heel. Dylan blinked. What are you? But that was as far as he got. Elise's legs swept out in a clean, low arc, catching Marco behind the knees and sending him tumbling backward with a grunt. Before Trevor could react, her other foot came around in a pivoting sweep, knocking him off balance and crashing into Zach's legs. Three bodies hit the floor almost simultaneously, gasps of shock cutting through the air. Dylan jumped back instinctively, but Elise was already rising, calm, coiled, and locked in. Still want me to bark? She asked, her voice sharp as broken glass. But the bark they had wanted, the humiliation, the power trip, was about to become a scream. Dylan's confidence cracked the moment Elise rose to her feet, calm and controlled like a soldier walking into war. Zach scrambled back against the desk, his phone slipping from his hand as he shouted, "She's gone psycho." Marco groaned from the floor, clutching his side, and Trevor rolled onto his back, stunned, his mouth hanging open. Elise didn't flinch. Her hands were loose, her feet grounded. Every movement was deliberate, efficient, no wasted energy. "You thought I was quiet because I was scared," she said evenly, her eyes fixed on Dylan. "But I was quiet because I was calculating." Dylan lunged, swinging recklessly in panic, but Elise stepped aside like she'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. She caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted, and dropped low, yanking his arm off balance as her legs swept behind his knee. He hit the ground with a thud that knocked the breath out of him. Elise knelt beside him, holding his arm pinned. "That's your throwing shoulder, isn't it?" she asked coldly. "I could dislocate it right now, and you'd never throw another pass again." Dylan gasped, frozen, blinking up at her. Zach tried to bolt for the door, but Elise turned just enough to say, "Go ahead, Zach. Run. Just don't forget I've got your phone, and it's still recording." Zach stopped mid-step, looking at the glowing screen now lying a few feet from him. Elise released Dylan's arm and stood, pocketing the jade pendant in one smooth motion. Trevor groaned as he sat up, his face pale. She was faking it. She knew. "Of course I knew," Elise said. "You planned this thinking I'd beg, cry, crawl. That I'd be too scared to fight back. You forgot one thing. Some people train not to show fear, but to end threats." Zach swallowed hard. "You're crazy." "No," Elise replied calmly. "I'm trained. There's a difference." She walked over to his phone, picked it up, and stopped the recording. "And I just collected the evidence I need." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Dylan's ragged breathing and the creak of the prop trunk as Trevor leaned against it, dazed. Elise turned toward the door, her hand hovering near the knob. "You should all get checked out," she said flatly. "And when you do, tell the nurse exactly what happened. You tried to make someone crawl," and she stood up. She opened the door, then paused. "Oh, and Zach." He looked up, flinching. "If I find out that video ever goes online, the next time I sweep, I won't stop at the legs." And with that, Elise stepped into the hallway, leaving behind 4 stunned boys, 1 broken power structure, and a silence that felt a lot like justice catching its breath. The fallout hit Oak Valley high like a tidal wave, and for once, the truth couldn't be buried. Elise didn't post the video herself. She didn't have to. The moment she left the drama room, she forwarded the recording to the school counselor, the principal, and her aunt, who forwarded it straight to the district superintendent. But what truly set everything in motion was what came next. Olivia Grant, a theater tech who had been hiding behind the curtain during the confrontation, uploaded her own video to social media. She'd recorded the entire scene from her vantage point. Every degrading command, every cruel laugh, every second leading up to the sweep kick that changed everything. The clip exploded overnight. Hashtag Elise Didn't Bark began trending by morning, accompanied by a surge of support from students, alumni, and complete strangers. Even those who hadn't dared speak up before now shared their stories about Dylan, Zach, Marco, and Trevor. The locker slams, the revenge porn rumors, the intimidation tactics that had been hidden beneath smiles and varsity jackets. The school tried to contain it, but the momentum was unstoppable. Local news outlets picked up the story within 24 hours. National ones within 72. Elise's face was blurred in the early reports, but people recognized her. Teachers who had turned a blind eye suddenly remembered policies. Counselors who had once said, "Boys will be boys," issued apologies they hoped would be enough. But it was too late for excuses. The district launched a formal investigation. Dylan and his crew were immediately suspended pending expulsion hearings. Zach's phone, now in evidence, contained dozens of videos, some dating back 2 years, documenting harassment, bullying, and manipulation. Elise was called into the office, not for punishment, but to give an official statement. She brought her phone, her mother, and her composure. Principal Monroe, red-faced and jittery, tried to soften the situation. "Elise, we had no idea. You did," she interrupted, her voice calm. "You just didn't care until it went public." Monroe flinched, but said nothing. Meanwhile, students who had once avoided her in the halls now slipped her notes of support. "Thank you for standing up. You made it okay to speak. I wish I'd done what you did." Elise read each one, but said little. She hadn't done this for praise. She'd done it because she was tired of pretending that being quiet was the same as being safe. When a school board member tried to meet with her privately, Elise declined. She had nothing more to prove. The truth was out. Her silence had been replaced by action. And the sound it made, when the lies cracked and the fear dissolved, was louder than any bark they'd ever wanted from her. The formal consequences came swiftly. Within 2 weeks, Dylan, Zach, Marco, and Trevor were expelled from Oak Valley High. But that wasn't all. Police investigations confirmed that the group had not only violated the school's bullying policies, but also broken multiple state laws, illegal surveillance, harassment, and distribution of invasive media. Zach's phone alone contained enough footage to warrant charges. Parents who had once defended their sons now sat pale-faced in courtrooms as Elise's video played on repeat for the school board, district investigators, and later, local authorities. Dylan's football scholarship was revoked. Zach's college applications were pulled under review. Trevor and Marco faced community service and probation. And while their futures unraveled in slow motion, Elise wasn't watching. She was too busy rebuilding something far more important, her own peace. It started with the school's apology, a public statement issued by the principal and read aloud at an assembly. Elise didn't attend it. She was in the counselor's office with Olivia, quietly reviewing the draft for a new peer advocacy program they were designing together. The district mandated staff training on anti-bullying response. A third-party monitoring service was brought in to handle all harassment reports. Most notably, the school partnered with Elise's mother to create a self-defense and confidence-building workshop, offered weekly after school. Elise didn't think she'd want to be involved. But when she saw the first class, a dozen quiet girls and shy boys standing nervously on the mats, something stirred in her. She stepped forward, took a deep breath, and began teaching them how to stand, how to breathe, how to speak with their bodies even when their voices were shaking. "You don't need to hit hard," she said to a girl barely 5 feet tall. "You just need to be clear. Boundaries are loud when you know how to hold them." And for the first time since arriving in Texas, Elise felt not just strong, but steady. Students who had once looked through her now greeted her with nods or thanks. Teachers gave her space, not out of fear, but respect. Even the counselor who had once dismissed her concerns asked her to help train staff on what real warning signs looked like. Elise didn't say yes right away, but she didn't say no. She was still learning what her voice could do when it wasn't being silenced. And that was enough for now. As for Dylan's crew, last she heard, they were attending an alternative program across town. Word was Dylan had started volunteering at a youth shelter as part of his restitution. Whether it was performative or genuine didn't matter to Elise. She didn't need closure from them. She'd already written her own. 6 months later, Oak Valley High was not the same school. The posters that once screamed hollow slogans had been replaced with something real. Respect is non-negotiable. The counselor's office now held monthly student-led forums. Elise stood at the back of one, watching as a sophomore shared their story about finally reporting a teammate who had been bullying them for months. The sophomore's voice trembled at first, but steadied. That alone made it worth it. Elise no longer walked with her eyes down. She moved with quiet certainty, like someone who no longer had to convince herself she belonged. Her father's jade pendant hung around her neck, resting over her heart each day as a reminder, not of pain, but of power. At graduation, She didn't give a speech. She didn't need to. Her name alone drew the loudest applause. She sat with her mom and her aunt in the bleachers, watching as Olivia, now the class valedictorian, spoke about courage. It's not always loud, Olivia said, glancing at Elise. Sometimes, courage looks like silence, right before a sweep kick. The auditorium erupted in laughter and cheers, not mocking, but celebratory. Elise smiled, not because she wanted the attention, but because people were laughing at justice, not at cruelty. And that mattered. After the ceremony, a younger student approached her. She wore thick glasses and spoke in a whisper. "Are you the girl from the video?" Elise nodded. The girl looked down, twisting her hands. "I used to think I had to take it. Like, if I said anything, it would get worse. But after I saw what you did, I told my mom. My uncle doesn't live with us anymore." Elise blinked, her heart catching. She knelt slightly, meeting the girl's eyes. "That wasn't just me," she said softly. "That was you choosing to stand up. That's what makes you brave." The girl nodded, her shoulders a little straighter as she walked away. Elise stood slowly, the warm spring air lifting the edges of her graduation gown. She thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the anger, the fight, the victory, and the cost. And then she thought about what came after, the kids who spoke out, the ones who found strength, the ones who were still learning. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a fighter. She was something deeper, something steadier. A reminder that when enough is truly enough, even the quietest voice can shake the walls. As her mom wrapped an arm around her shoulder and they walked toward the parking lot, Elise looked back at the school one last time. The place that had tried to crush her. The place she'd rebuilt from the inside out. And with one deep breath, she let it go. The fight was over. The lesson had landed. And the warrior had won, without ever barking once.